Hi, my name's Anna Cousins, and I presently live in Westfield, Indiana. We have a son on the spectrum. His diagnosis is PDD-NOS. He's 18 now and attends a public charter school here. Let me go back to the very beginning because I think it sets the tone for every support that he's had and the attitudes that we have all had. When our son was 5 years old, he started out his 5th year of age. He was a year ahead of his peers, socially, verbally, everything. Then with an 8-month period, he lost that year of development. So he was on peer, and then he continued to lose, so that he was at least a year behind. He lost physical abilities. He was aware that something had happened. No one to this day has been able to tell us what happened, but we knew it was very severe. We had an acquaintance who was a pastor's wife who worked here at Indianapolis at St. Vincent's Hospital on 86th Street, and she had seen him prior to this time. And I called her up and said, I want to make an appointment with you. I want you to evaluate him again. Something's not right. It was probably the worst hour of our lives to watch him in there. He was under the table, over the desk, and she was trying to do the evaluations and everything. I thought I would just dissolve into tears. She finished the evaluations. She came out of the door and she walked toward me and she said, "We can help him." And at that point, it changed everything. From total despair to, okay, we can work on this. And there'll be something for him in particular that can be done. And we have approached everything that way. What works for him? We didn't care what worked for anybody else, what works for him. And that one experience, I think, defined how we approached everything else. How we approached school personnel in the IEPs. That's great, but that doesn't work for him. What is going to work for him is going to be in this area. Let's work on that. We understood oftentimes that people who had come out of colleges and universities had little or minimal training. Or that they, and as one girl said, well, I worked with one person with autism and this worked for them. And I said, I think that's wonderful that you've had that success story. But if you know one person on the spectrum, you know one person on the spectrum. Things that are going well for our son right now are that he is in a public charter school that is truly meeting his needs. We were homeschooling, and I felt as he was going into high school, he really needed to make that switch over to working with other adults and interacting even more than he already did with people of his own age. And I think that going to the Indianapolis Metropolitan High School has made a huge difference for him. In fact, he himself says, this school has allowed me to learn the way I learn best and to progress and to fulfill the dreams that I have. At this time, he's just turned 18. He is taking a dual credit course, which means he is taking a course that he will get high school credit for and college credit for. He loves it. He said there's not a mean bone in anybody's body there. After our son finishes high school, he's going to take what they call like a year. We want him to be out on his own, having a job. I would love to see huge support then at the very beginning of that. Let's get him out of high school. Let's work on some skills. Let's get him into the job market because he can already begin to earn before he goes into college. I think that may make a huge difference for him, and I'd love to see those kind of supports. Huge supports there at the beginning and phase out. You know, let's help him right off the very bat. Let's take care of these anxieties right off the bat, and then let's just phase out. Let's not keep going, keep supporting. as I look at the question of, what is not working so well for him, I think it would be, I have a concern. My husband is retired. I am older as well. I'm going back into the workforce. We have great concerns about finances. Before now, we've had absolutely wonderful insurance. We've had great support from the people who were at my husband's company. I do see money being a huge concern. I am glad that my son is able to advocate for himself, but just the ability to pay for things that will assist him in furthering his goals. He wants to go into child psychology, and he wants to do research. He wants to work for an international firm, working and helping them develop and test toys for different cultures. How one culture views a toy is totally different than another culture will. Coming from the autism family, he understands about we don't see things the same. So he really wants to do this, and he's looking at that, but is mature enough to understand that it may not be where he eventually ends up, but for right now, that's his goal. I see a lot of expense there, perhaps in many of the universities, if they offer additional tutoring courses, is an expense. How do we pay for this? As my husband and I age, our earning power goes down. We have no savings. It was well spent in terms of speech and all of these kind of therapies that you get. But we have to look at what's going to happen to us as we age. That's a concern for us. We'd like to see him living on his own, taking care of himself, going to work, having friends, which he does. He'll keep those friends, and making new ones, being able to go where he wants to and enjoy things, being financially independent, of course, and we think that he will succeed in that. I mean, for us, that's probably not any different. It's just how we get there. We have a son who is very verbal. He understands right from wrong. He feels that he is confident enough to go and speak to adults that he does not know about things. But last night, we were saying, you should be the one to go speak with so-and-so. And we acted it out. And he said, oh, okay, I didn't know. I wish that more people understood these kids. If you will tell them, you need to be the one to speak to the teacher, to speak to the principal, to speak to the PE teacher. That I think we should be doing that earlier, not later. So much of the time we've had to be the advocates for our children because they're slow to be verbal. I think we ought to be training these teachers and these administrators that they're going to have to wait till our child is able, give them the time to speak to them. And I think that's something that needs to happen. It would be wonderful if there were a website that you could go to and maybe type in a question and have various answers to that question come up so that you could go through and read it. I don't think that most of the kids on the spectrum do well asking these questions person to person, but a website where they can type in, is there help for job training? Where it comes in, whoever you are, from whatever agency you're from, that would be connected, so that even if the state says, no, we're not going to take responsibility for that, but here's an area you can go to. That's fine. But it would be nice if there was one site that they could go to, like an ask the gov or something, type thing. I think that would be a wonderful help for many people. I think about now, we were so lucky in many of the resources we found, because one therapist would say, well, so-and-so's really good. And I think, he or she might work well with him. It was so much word of mouth. Wouldn't it be wonderful if there's one site you go to and whatever question you had, whether it was about a service or a provider, that you could find these answers quickly. Whether it's, who's there available in my area. Another thing I'd like to see the state work on is, at one point, our son needed psychological help. And we were fortunate that we lived close to Indianapolis and we could go to what was offered there. It was the only psychological therapy that was offered. There was none in our county. We had to drive to another county to get it. And we met people who were bringing their families 2 hours because unless their child had a drug or alcohol dependency, there was nothing available for that child in the county. They would load up all of their kids because they had small children and were single parents, drive 2 hours so their child could receive psychological counseling in a group. And that's all there was. There was just a group thing. That's all you could afford. And then they would drive 2 hours back. There's got to be something better.